Hey everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, To Bonus or Not to Bonus? That is the question. My name is Quentin Thomas, and I'm your host for today's webinar. Thank you for joining for another insightful session, specially tailored for technology transfer leaders interested in bonus programs and structures in their offices. In today's webinar, we are exploring how bonuses and similar incentive programs may or may not be effective motivators in technology transfer and commercialization offices. Our panel will share their experience and insights on the advantages and potential pitfalls of bonuses in tech transfer, designing a bonus structure, and metrics for evaluating performance and incentivizing the right outcomes. This will be an interactive session, so before we begin, I'd like to quickly share a few tips on how to get the most out of today's session. At the end of our discussion, there will be a live Q&A. Use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom window to submit your questions throughout the session. We may not get to all of your questions, but we will do our best. We want this session to be an opportunity for you to learn from one another as well as our panelists. So we will be looking to you, our attendees, to also share your insights as well. Throughout the webinar, there will be opportunities for you to share your own experiences and insights through a few polls. We encourage you to share additional thoughts and engage openly in the chat with one another. Jeff Bond from Chat with Leaders Media is serving as today's engagement director, so he will be active in the Zoom chat. Speaking of polls, no, this is not an election thing, but we are going to give everyone a quick warm-up poll and then jump right into this first poll. All right, so we can go ahead and launch the first poll. The question is, if you could receive a bonus for one of the following achievements in your office, which would you choose? That's surviving back-to-back meetings with ease, coming up with the year's best coffee brew in the office, mastering the art of interpreting legal jargon, finally emptying your email inbox, or winning the unofficial office snack-off competition. All right, so I don't remember who it was. I think it was Glenn beforehand was saying that he thinks that the email will win, but email definitely won. But mastering the art of interpreting legal jargon was a close second. So thanks everyone for participating in this poll. Like I said, there will be a few more throughout the session as well too. So prior to this webinar, we also sent out a survey on bonus structures and technology transfer. We're excited to share the results with you. But don't worry, you'll also receive a summary of the results from our sponsor, Gardner Innovation Search Partners, after the webinar. So let's jump into the survey results. So for the first question, out of 48 respondents, only 9 said that they have some form of bonus structure in their office. And then out of those who did have an incentive program of some sort, the majority said they are performance-based, including 2 people who said it was performance-based, one combined with stay and the other combined with retention bonuses. Oh, sorry, stay or retention bonuses, and the other being combined with profit sharing. And amongst those offices that do have bonuses, most said they are individual bonuses. There were a couple of team bonus or both structures of a combination of individual and team. And then out of those offices who do not currently have a bonus program, the number one reason was a lack of approval from administration, but that was followed by budgetary constraints and a lack of necessity. We also got some additional responses as well. Out of those additional responses for reasons that there's not one, the top reason was concern about fairness or concerns about incentivizing the right behaviors, and then state regulations as a public institution. So there are, of course, a lot of public institutions here joining here, so can understand that may be a concern. And then the next question, what are the top 3 metrics offices use to evaluate technology transfer success? The top 3 from the choices that were available were number of licenses, number of disclosures, then licensing revenue. But we also saw responses such as products and services on the market or the product being available to the public. And then when you dig a little further into the responses, you see that offices are also looking at qualitative measures, not just quantitative. So we had some responses such as whether inventions are being used in responsible ways. And the one that was most common was customer satisfaction, which I'd be really interested seeing some information in the chat. If you don't mind sharing how exactly you're measuring customer satisfaction, because there's a lot of ways you can do that as well, too. And then when it comes to what we see as the biggest challenges, budget constraints came out as number one choice for why they were the biggest challenge for launching it. But that was, again, was out of the choices we had available in the survey. If you dig a little deeper into the big picture here, you get a little bit more details. And so, out of the other responses, one response summarized many of those answers well in saying the biggest challenge is the unintended consequences of metric-based compensation. Amongst those responses, we also found competition amongst managers for what they would consider to be the best technology, coming across as a commission and creating conflicts and negotiating in good faith, where the licensing manager could be perceived as negotiating what is the best for them as opposed to for the technology or the organization. And then the other one was ethical concerns, whether that be perceived concerns or actual ethical concerns. To round this out, the question, what non-monetary incentives have been most effective in motivating technology transfer professionals? This was a free-form answer, and some common responses were received, including work-life balance and professional development. But the clear number one here was recognition. At first, this surprised me because coming into this webinar, I'm thinking about bonuses and monetary incentives. But given the work we've done at Chat with Leaders Media and helping elevate cultures and team engagement within organizations, we've also seen these themes again and again in the past couple of years. I'm sure it will continue to come up in many conversations, and I'm definitely looking forward to diving into this conversation. But before we jump in, I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Gardner Innovation Search Partners, for their support in making this webinar possible. Now, I'll pass it over to Glenn Gardner to share a little bit about his organization and introduce himself before we introduce the rest of the panelists. So, Glenn, over to you.
Happy Halloween. I came as a headhunter. This is how we club the people out in the tech transfer community to bring them to some of our clients. I wanted to thank you guys for joining this. This came about from a conversation with a person in our community. They wanted to know about bonus and no bonus structures, which is why we're having this. We'd like to thank all the people that have joined us to put this together. We'd like to thank you all for attending this, and I'm really humbled that people came from all around the world to tune in, and some of our partners in Australia, where we're going to send this recording to them after. And if there's one thing you could do for your trick or treat for me, if you could go to Gardner, our LinkedIn page for Gardner Innovation Search Partners and follow us, that would be the price of admission. So thank you guys for all joining us.
And so now I'm happy to introduce the rest of our fantastic panelists, Laura Savatski, Patrick Klepcyk, and Ashley Stevens. I'll start by handing it off to you, Laura. So welcome, Laura.
Well, I don't have a bone to pick with anybody, but I'm a big fan of Halloween. That's all you get for my costume this year. I'm really happy to be here, really excited to be talking about bonuses and bonus structures. I think they're a very important part of work life for some people, and they're completely absent for others. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. My background started as a bench scientist in medical research. I worked for a medical college where, though we didn't have a bonus structure, we did have a very rigorous annual review, and that was tied to raises and your climb up the ladder. From there, I worked for a startup where we didn't have any money to give any bonuses. So those bonuses were in the form of stock in the company, which did pay off for me eventually, but it took quite a while. From there, I went on to work for a research institution, and it was a private research institution, a not-for-profit, where we did have a bonus structure. I'm going to talk a lot more about that later. And now I'm working at University of Louisville, where we don't have a bonus structure in place currently. And that's what we're here to talk about today. My background also includes some leadership positions within Autumn, on the ATTP board, et cetera, et cetera. Happy to be here. Over to you, Ashley. I can't wait to see your costume.
Well, you're not going to. So this is me. I've been retired from BU for about 12 years now, but still professionally active through the Focus IP group, where the group is a slight exaggeration. It's a one-man company. So my involvement in bonuses, I'm sorry to say, is purely theoretical. I have never been with a company that had a bonus structure in my life. I started out with the Procter & Gamble company, which did have bonuses, but I was with a very young and fast-growing division. And when they had bonuses before I joined, they hit the maximum every time, and this irritated all the other groups that didn't hit the maximum every time. So we just didn't have a bonus structure in the industrial chemicals division. As with Laura, when I was with startups, biotech startups, your stock ownership was your bonus. And I made a little bit out of the first one, and the second share certificate is framed on my wall, which is never a good sign. And then neither at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute nor at Boston University have we had bonuses. I was involved in some of the early days of when bonuses started to be discussed in workshops at the Autumn Annual Meeting with Fred Reinhardt, and I think Fred took over the running on that for quite a while. So I'm delighted to be here today to participate in the discussion. Over to you, Patrick.
I too am excited to be here and similar experiences. One of my first positions was with a startup based on University of Technology over 22 years ago, and that got me interested in this interface. I spent some time with GSK, R&D China. We did have a bonus structure, but the main reason I'm here is some experience at the University of Virginia, the Licensing and Ventures Group, or formerly the Patent Foundation. So when I was a director of licensing there, we launched incentive compensation, if you will. I think we didn't like to call it bonus structure. It mainly grew out of the fact that our executive director was the only one getting a bonus. And so the desire to reward the licensing team for the same metrics that aligned with his bonus structures is really how that came to be. Performance to budget, disclosures, and deals. And that grew over time to even expand into some of the support groups as well. A little bit background on myself, you can see the slide here, but I've been in tech transfer for about 20 years. I've been at Iowa State as a director of the Office of Innovation Commercialization and the president of the Iowa State University Research Foundation for about 3 years. Was also at the Cleveland Clinic, Case Western Reserve University, and National University of Singapore. Back to you, Quentin.
All right, awesome. Thank you. And just a quick introduction of myself. My name is Quentin Thomas, even though I've been talking to you all this time. I'm co-founder of Chat with Leaders Media, along with my business partner, Jeff Bond, who's our experience lead in the chat with you all today. At Chat with Leaders, we create compelling podcasts, live events, and content strategy for purpose-driven companies, specializing in connecting these organizations with their core audiences, who are their people and customers, through engaging and meaningful content. I actually started my career in tech transfer as a fellow at the University of Florida, Office of Technology Licensing, and I started then I served as the marketing manager in the Office of Technology Transfer at Emory University, then transitioned into industry in a customer success role and at a software company called Infotech. And now I found myself coming full circle back to tech transfer through my own company now, and also working with Glenn and the great Gardner Innovation Search Partners team as the host of the Gardner Innovation Search Partners podcast. So with all of that being said, how about we just go ahead and dive into our discussion today? The first thing we're going to do to kick off is open up with another poll. So for this one, the question is, does your office currently have a formal bonus or incentive structure? Yes, no, or maybe you're considering it. So it looks like 12 of you currently have a bonus or incentive structure of some sort. Most of you do not, 63%, it's 34, and then a few of you are actually considering it. So hopefully during this webinar today, will help give maybe clarity, maybe a little bit of insights into it. So first thing, let's I'm going to actually ask the first question, and I'm going to kick it off with Patrick. So Patrick, can you share any examples of, and actually you started to a little bit in your intro, and that's why we want to start with you, some examples of successful bonus programs you've encountered, or in the converse, what specific elements you've seen work effectively in practice?
Yeah, so I think a little bit more details on UVA's program. Um, what was successful was that it was both individual and team based. So you could still meet your individual goals, but the entire office had to perform the budget, or else the other two components weren't available to you. There was a little bit of the recognition piece slash quality component, and that came into your individual as well. So that was at my discretion. You know, somebody had a really good year, and the other two categories are really, customer service oriented, good faculty relationships. I had some discretion with still giving them their full amount, even if they didn't meet their individual numbers. But it took a lot of work to split up and forecast the deal number. One person focused on really our tangible material portfolio. So she might have been doing about 20 deals. And then maybe someone else was more focused on startups, or they were doing maybe five-ish. And so I think it was a really good team effort, and we were able to keep people motivated as we continued to hit our numbers. And then when that expanded to other support staff into error messages for IADISON, a reduction in those, we also had unique set up at UVA where we had two in-house patent attorneys, and so their bonus structure was based on the number of conversions and or provisionals that they forecasted to do that year. So it was really quantitative in nature for the most part.
And then Laura, could you share a little bit about your experience with bonus programs or incentive programs?
Sure. So I worked at the Blood Research Institute for almost 25 years. And for approximately the last 10 or 12 years of that, we did have a bonus structure that was implemented. And Patrick, you hit on something, that word motivated. And I think for us, we had a similar structure in that the organization had hit its overall financial goals, or we couldn't afford to pay out these bonuses. And so the board had to approve payment of bonuses, and then your department had to meet its financial goals as well. And then you needed to meet your personal goals. So those personal goals were set every year in your annual review. And they really help to keep people motivated and on track to meet very specific goals. What I liked about the bonus structure is that it did promote teamwork for us, because there was a departmental component. There wasn't competition with other people. It was more of we want the entire team to succeed, because if they don't, we're not going to get this bonus. And then I need to meet my individual targets too, or I won't get a portion of my bonus. I think the other thing that made it really work there is that it was systems wide. Everybody was eligible for a bonus. So there was a certain bonus level available to managers that wasn't available to part-time staff or to regular staff, but everyone had a bonus available to them, and they were just different by some small amounts. But I really liked the fact that it kept people motivated and on task. It helped me stay motivated and on task with what my goals were, and it made me a better employee, I thought.
Yeah. And, talking about staying motivated on task, I mean, I think one of the things that really came out during the survey, a big thing that came out during the survey, is this thing of motivating the right or wrong behavior. So I'm actually pivoting a little bit, and just so everyone knows, I do have questions here that I want to ask, and I'm going to jump around a little bit because just the order of things here. And as a matter of fact, I think, and I'll give everyone a second with answering this. What do you think is an effective incentive for motivating people in a tech transfer office? Because in the survey, we saw some people saying that you're going to motivate people to do to serve their own interest, or not necessarily the best interest of the technology or the organization. So if you don't mind, let's jump into that since we're talking about motivation. And Jeff, I'd also say during this time you can go ahead and post that poll question number 5 of, in your opinion, which is the following is the most effective incentive for tech transfer offices. And so I'll give you all a second, but yeah, Laura, it sounds like you were going to say something
Yeah,
with that.
I can take that question. I think you have to be very careful with what the individual goals are that you set, because they can be gamed fairly easily. So one year I had increasing our total number of disclosures by 25%. Our disclosures had been low the previous year, so we wanted to get them back in line. So I thought, oh, it's going to be a great target to increase disclosures. And what I saw by doing that, even, for myself, was that I was very motivated to hit that number. But as everyone in the audience knows, a disclosure is not a disclosure is not a disclosure. That you can have some really crummy light disclosures, and you can have some really fulsome quality disclosures that are going to turn into a great product for the market. And so you have to be careful in which goals you pick, because people are motivated by those measures. And you do have to be able to quantify whether or not somebody hit this number or not, because if you have a qualitative thing there, you're just going to have arguments, and people are going to argue with their supervisor about whether they hit it or they didn't hit it. And that's like the worst thing you could do within the realm of having a bonus, because it's supposed to be a positive experience, right? It's not supposed to bring people apart and cause division. It's supposed to be a positive thing that you're doing. So you want to have it defined very, very clearly whether you hit it or you didn't, for both the employee and the supervisor, who's then going to approve the little checkbox, yes, they did it, or no, they didn't.
Right.
And of course, Laura, by getting a disclosure, you are creating an expectation in the mind of the researcher who submitted it that something's going to happen with that disclosure. So you can up your disclosures, but you better be ready to up the activity to attempt to market them and license them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, we found that they were inflated disclosure numbers in full transparency. And so when I came here at Iowa State, it was like, we then began to measure at UVA what are the actionable disclosures. And so just using some round figures, if we were getting 200, maybe really only 100 were worth time and effort. And then that does put pressure on the system for, internal folks from compliance and reporting and things like that. So completely agree that some of those numbers can be gained. And, just like, are you doing free options or, minimal $1,000 payments per option to get a count for a deal? You really got to stay on top of, clarity with the numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah, and who determined whether they were actionable or not?
Let's say enabled.
Yeah. And Jeff, you can go ahead and end that poll and show the results, and we'll continue to discuss this topic as well too. Yeah, so the audience is saying that well, number 1 is financial bonuses. Number 2, flexible work arrangements. Number 3, public recognition. It's interesting because in the survey, I saw a lot of public recognition come up in the survey. And I think, Laura, you were talking about how if you're going to put some metrics in place, it does need to have some sort of quantitative or measurable aspect to it, because otherwise this is going to be a lot of arguing, right? And like you and Patrick are talking about here. When it comes to actually having those metrics and putting them in place and enforcing them, like how do you because Patrick, actually I'm going to go to you. One of the things you mentioned was what Ashley was asking about, like how do you determine whether or not that is a actionable disclosure, right? So whenever you do have metrics that are in place that to some may seem a little more qualitative, are there guardrails or are there ways that you address that? And just to kind of give you an idea of where I'm going with it too, in the survey, one of the things people talked about was customer success. And some of them said the way that they get it, and customer success seems subjective, but one of the ways they got around that is using like maybe a 5-point scale with their inventors as well, the PIs. So any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if I was to criticize some aspects of the program, to Laura's point, it's supposed to be a positive experience. But I did find that often you are looking at poor customer service feedback in order to give less of that qualitative piece. And so if I was being self-critical for my experience at UVA, that didn't come into play all the time, but that just sprung to mind with Laura's comments, as opposed to, very proactive, positive momentum of here's, 5 faculty members that gave kudos emails and then rewarding that. It was usually looking at where people had ways to improve. And so that might have left a bad taste in people's mouths.
Yeah.
And of course, part of the problem is that we only license about 3/4 of the invention disclosures we get, about half of the new patent filings we make. So, 3/4 of faculty, you're telling them their baby is ugly and nobody wants it, which is never a message that people want to hear, and that can probably factor into customer satisfaction surveys.
Yep.
Yeah. And what are your thoughts about things? So I'm just pulling out some more things that we heard from our audience in the pre-survey too. Each of you, what are your thoughts about things such as industry engagement? I know that people talked about, okay, licensing revenue, number of license disclosures, but there was also things like industry engagement or getting products into the market, or one person even said actually seeing products that are being used by people, impacting lives, like having a metric like that where you can actually see things like that. What are your thoughts about those, pros, cons to those? Are there other things that you think would be better, or even in the inverse, are there things you think are just terrible metrics to use as well?
Well, I think license income and to a certain extent products launched are terrible metrics, because they are typically the result of things that were done 10 years ago, and probably the person responsible is long gone and they ain't going to get compensated for their work, and somebody else is standing on their shoulders and getting the benefit. So I think those two are absolutely terrible metrics. I think probably one of the benefits of working with your institution to create a bonus structure is going to be, it's going to force the institution to really decide what it wants from you, from the tech transfer office. And we know that the senior management, different people have different perspectives. The vice president for research, wants faculty satisfaction. The vice president for finance wants money. The general counsel wants no issues. So I think coming up with a bonus structure, top management's going to have to come to agreement on what it really wants from this function, which I think means it could take quite a long time to get one set up if you don't have one.
Yeah, and that's really interesting you mentioned that, Ashley. At the Blood Research Institute where we had this I thought very well designed bonus structure, the goals of everyone were public and they flowed down. So we had this whole process where the CEO had to set her goals first. And then after she set her goals, all of the vice presidents set their goals to support and aid one of her goals, which were all the strategy her goals were all aligned with all of our strategic initiatives for the year. And so now the VPs had to set their goals in support of hers, which were the strategic initiatives. And then the people that reported to those VPs, as you went down a couple of more layers, they all had to support something that was a goal of their business unit, their leader, etc. So it was a very well thought through design, and what it got us to was a really focused, um, a really focused approach, and not just, shooting things in the dark like, I just want more invention disclosures. You asked about earlier, Quentin, industry engagement from the audience and what would a measure be like. I actually had one of those goals one year. It was the number of confidential disclosure agreements that we inked, or an agreement that had confidential disclosure language within it with a new industry partner. So we were looking at, how well am I engaging new people that we've never engaged before, and having a serious conversation about licensing a tech. Now, did all of those result in licenses? No, but you have to do a combination of sort of shots on goal and goals that you get, because you're never going to get a goal unless you make a shot on goal. And so you've got to incentivize the behaviors that are going to lead to your wins, but not necessarily the end win in the very beginning, because you need to have a trajectory to follow.
I mean, one of the principles of the HR profession is be careful of what behavior you incentivize, because you will get it. So one of the sad stories I recall hearing of, years ago, was that when the University of Chicago and Argonne National Labs set up Arch Development, they wanted it to get to break even as fast as possible. Somehow tech transfer offices are held to different financial standards than other administrative offices of the university. So they gave a bonus for getting to financial break even. Well, if you want to get to financial break even, how are you going to do it? You're going to license stuff fully paid up front. And those of you who've taken my valuation course know I have those two inversely correlated curves, risk going down and value going up. So you do your fully paid up license, you're doing it at the beginning when the value's lowest, and they got to break even. And when years later they went back and said, well, what would have happened if we'd done more traditional licenses? They said, holy mackerel, look how much we gave up. So be very careful what behavior you incent, because you will get it. That's why I say, the exercise of creating a program will really force the institution to decide what it wants.
That's great, both of you, and a great example. Kind of going off of that, I think we can go ahead and launch the poll number 3 as well. So the question of that one was, what do you believe is the biggest challenge in implementing a bonus structure? And actually, I'd love to go to each one of you too. If kind of going off what you're talking about right now, incentivizing the right behavior. If you incentivize the wrong behavior, it's your fault. I mean, you incentivized it, right?
Yeah.
And I think I think there is a challenge with I do love the idea, Laura, of what you shared of the top-down goal setting, because it ensures everyone is in alignment. But then at the same time, you do run into this challenge, one challenge where people may not necessarily agree with the direction the leadership wants to take it, right?
Too bad, that's their leader. Get in line.
Yeah.
That was that, and in fact, that's what the bonus structure instilled, people to get in line behind the initiatives rather than doing something extraneous. And that has its pluses and minuses. I thought it was mostly pluses, because we stayed focused. And when you have focus, you're able to accomplish something.
Yeah, but the Blood Center, Laura, was really kind of a not-for-profit operating company, wasn't it? Much more than a university.
It was a not-for-profit that had some very large divisions within it that operated much like industry and for-profit companies. It's also an approximately $1 billion company. I mean, it's not a small potatoes kind of an operation. People may have never heard of it. That doesn't mean it's not a large organization.
Wow. Yeah. So, in our poll, I think we can, I'll give it a few more seconds. If you haven't filled out the poll, you can go ahead and fill that out. Right now, the number one answer in terms of what the audience believe is the biggest challenge in implementing a bonus structure is determining the right metrics. So I'd like to go back to you all and ask another follow-up question to that. What would each of you say if you had to choose the top 3 metrics you would consider to incentivize your team? And I know I don't think I prepped you all with this question before, so I can give you a second to answer it. So yeah, number one, as far as challenges from the audience, determining the right metrics was number one. Number two was university-wide approval. And those two were pretty far ahead of the other results, which were then budget constraints and measuring performance. And then we had an other. And I also want to encourage the audience, if you did say other, to go ahead and post your response to any of these questions in the chat as well. We'd love to see that, and the audience would love to see that as well too. But yeah, coming back to our panelists, what would you say are the important things to incentivize in your team?
Well, probably half my team is listening to the call. So you ask a loaded
Hello.
question and then all my lights went out. Oh, no. Yeah.
Maybe that's a signal for you to not answer. That's why the light went out.
Go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah, disclosures, deals, and dollars, but the dollars part being performance to budget. I do think, back to the previous comment though, in alignment with leadership, again, the program that I did at UVA grew out of the fact that executive director was getting a bonus, and so it was completely aligned with the same performance metrics that he was being measured against. And so now, whether or not that inflated disclosure numbers, that's probably a different debate, but at least from an organization perspective, we were aligned with the senior leadership. But here at Iowa State, it's still the disclosures, deals, and performance to budget.
And Glenn, I don't usually put you on the spot, but just from your perspective too, like the things that you've seen that offices are looking for, looking to achieve and whatnot, are there any things that you've seen stand out that you would think would be incentivized?
From my standpoint, the thing that we always that my clients tend to look for is how deal focused are people. So I think, Patrick, I never heard these 3 Ds. I'm gonna have to. Can we get a trademark on that one? Deals, dollars, and what was the third one?
Disclosures.
Disclosures. So I guess I've never heard those 3, but really the importance of a deal sheet and and then what are those deals, and even for junior people, how can you contribute to these deals? So I guess and that's the whole secret to this technology transfer community. If you were to boil down what is tech transfer, really the core thing that separates tech transfer people from everyone else is the ones that have, negotiate deals and that are good deal negotiators. So I'm gonna go with deals for 100, Alex.
And I think we have to remember that not everybody in the office is deal focused. We have a lot of people that are there as support folks that are doing administrative work, financial work, filing work, all these things that their whole job might be to be your patent liaison. Well, they don't have any deals then. So their measures are going to have to be completely different. And for those, I think of things like systems implementation and systems improvements. We're very tied to, getting our work done within the environment of the system that we use to organize it all. So system improvements can have a big impact on our efficiencies and our abilities to get better deals done faster.
The last 2 lawsuits I worked on, one university suing another, were over material transfer agreements. Typically, the lowest priority in the office, and it's massively important. So even the people doing MTAs need to be incentivized.
That's great. Wow. And then there's a good comment from, first, we're going to transition to Q&A soon. Thank you to everyone who has submitted a question. And also, just so you know, in the Q&A feature, you can upvote or thumbs up anything a question that you think would be good to ask as well. And just closing it out, Hannah also had a good comment of measuring performance is intertwined with determining the right metrics, as previously discussed, quantitative versus qualitative. So, those two are very intertwined. So yeah, I think,
Quentin, before we go on to the Q&A,
yeah,
can
sure.
I just supply a couple of resources to participants?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to post into the chat now a report issued by WIPO. Big effort, 5 years in the making, I think, at least. And I believe Tom Hockaday, who started out the project, was planning to be on this webinar. Very thoughtful document, discusses both incentives for researchers and incentives for tech transfer professionals. And there's a quote in there from a guy called Gardner. It says there are relatively few tech transfer professionals in the entire world. TTOs are all essentially competing for the same candidates, not to mention the industry roles many tech transfer professionals are opting for with their often higher pay scales. And the second resource I'll point people to is simply the autumn salary survey, which always has extraordinarily good data. The figures in our polls of both the live and the previous one of people getting bonuses being about 25% of the total seem to be entirely consistent. The autumn salary survey goes into great detail. The majority of responses are from the US, but there are some international ones there too. So I want the attendees to be aware of those two resources.
Yeah, I'm looking at the 2022 survey right now, and it was approximately 20% of institutions have, of the 121 polled, 23 reported having incentive compensation plans. And there were 17 that actually described the plan in some detail, and but they did not release the names of the institutions, though you can find them if you dig. So I encourage everyone, if you have access to the salary survey, there is a way to dig and find which places have them. If you're trying to design one for your office, I might look to and lean into the organizations who are listed on the salary survey to figure out how they structured figure out some different options that might work for you, because I think bonus and incentive compensation plans, they work because they work with the environment you have. It's not a one size fits all kind of an operation.
Yeah, the WIPO study looked in detail at Vanderbilt and Emory's and the Walter and Eliza Hill Institute in Melbourne, Australia.
Great. Thanks for sharing those resources too. Let's hop into some of the questions that have come from the audience as well. The most upvoted question right now, and actually any of you can answer, but I think it was in a question related to something Patrick mentioned, is what are thoughts on the actionable or enabled disclosure count really being a function of the researcher's capabilities and research quality, where it's not necessarily in control of the tech transfer BD group, depending on their role in the university? I'd say probably Patrick or Ashley. I feel like Ashley, you also had something that you could add to this too. But yeah, what are your thoughts on actionable or enabled disclosures really being a function of the researcher, as opposed to not necessarily in the control of tech transfer and depending on their role in the university? How does that factor in?
Well, one remembers that paper from Jerry and Marie Thursby called "Doing the Best We Can with the Shit We Get," which was based on a quote from Lou Berneman, who, when challenged to defend Penn's income against Columbia, said, "Give me Columbia's faculty and I'll give you Columbia's audience. We do the best we can with the shit we get." I think that's ridiculous. There's great inventions everywhere. As I go around the world, I find great ideas coming from everywhere. So I think quality of faculty, I discount.
I give you some applause on that, Ashley. That's a great answer.
Great. And Patrick, like you were about to say something, or anything you wanted to add?
I was just going to say, I mean, we all know there's a lag, right? And so we would try and meet with new faculty members to set up those relationships so that 3 to 5 years later, when they actually have something to disclose. They already know who we are, but I'd agree with Ashley and Laura as well. You can have, very well-funded faculty members that aren't really creating, translational ideas, and then junior faculty members that stumble upon, the next greatest thing.
What next question, and I'm not sure if either of you have any input on this, is just what impact, if any, have you seen bonuses have on retention and attraction of higher caliber team members? I feel like that might be a little harder to gauge because it's more dependent on someone letting you know that that's the case. But have any of you seen any impact that a bonus or incentive program has had on retaining or attracting higher caliber team members?
I think you're able to attract team members from a different sector. So some of what we do in tech transfer, it's this intersection between law, business, and the technology. And people in the business world, if they're working in industry, are used to having a bonus structure. They're used to having incentive pay. And to go to a place where that is locked down and not possible, they see that as a place that they're like, I don't want to go there. My bonus will be gone.
Yeah.
So now you're able to compete for those people if you have a bonus structure. Now, it is a question too of total pay. However, universities, I don't think are ever going to pay more than industry. And the bonuses are just there to, I believe, really incentivize and focus people. I really see that as the main use of the bonuses. And it can open up some new people who wouldn't have considered working at the university to work there.
Great. And I think this one kind of something you started to touch on, and this one is a both mix of a question and their own opinion about the question too, is fundamental. It says fundamental question: why should anyone in the TTO get a bonus? Are good people leaving because they don't get enough money? If so, fix the salary and other recognition and rewards. If still not enough, off they go with your blessing. So.
I love that one, Tom.
Thanks, Tom. Any other thoughts? Anything anyone want to add to that, or agree, disagree? I think Laura, you kind
Totally
of touched.
agree.
Yeah.
It's total compensation,
Yep.
but it's also sort of total rewards. When we don't think of everything within our compensation package often, we just went through some salary adjustments here in our environment. And one of the things I think that employees were spotlighted to think about was their base pay. However, though your bonus might be linked to your base pay, like as a percentage of base pay, that's a pretty typical structure. You get a lot more rewards from your employer than just your base pay. You get insurance, you get contributions to your retirement, you get discounts at local stores, maybe you get other incentives and other financial incentives. And in addition, some places have more or less vacation time and time off and flexibility to do other things. In addition, there's the support of professional development for people, et cetera, et cetera. So it's more complicated than just bonus or no. It's just a bonus is one piece of the entire picture of what keeps an employee happy and engaged. I totally agree with one of the comments made in the pre-work that it's about employee satisfaction overall, like how satisfied are employees, and there's a lot of different ways to drive that. And every employee is not the same. Not every employee is going to be motivated by a bonus. Some are going to be motivated by words of encouragement or publicly making a big deal over one of their accomplishments and giving them recognition. That's really important to some people. So you have to find what works for your people and in your environment.
I think at BU, maybe some of my former employees will reach out and tell me I'm full of it, but I felt, we didn't have a bonus structure, but I thought the entire team was totally and utterly committed and motivated. And we set targets for everybody. And we had weekly meetings of which progress towards those targets were discussed. And as we got to the beginning of June, the June 30 being the end of the fiscal, the excitement of the horse races to get the deals closed by June 30 was great. Yeah, I'd have liked to have been able to reward them with an incentive, but I felt we stayed totally motivated and committed.
Yeah, great.
I mean, for any of my staff listening, we're not trying to implement a bonus structure here at Iowa State. So part of it, doing it at UVA was the ability that we could, right? So we were separate foundations, separate employees. HR was, the three directors of the office. And I do think, to Laura's point, the total package that you have at Iowa State and all the other benefits that come along with it. I agree with Tom's comment. You can either fix the salary, or if the salary's not enough, then move on.
A lot of people in the webinar may not even be able to, like you're saying, may not even be able to implement one. And so this is not one of the Q&A questions, but I think it's relevant to a lot of people. What are other creative ways you can motivate or incentivize your team if you're not able to implement a bonus or incentive program?
And there's so many. There are so many. Additional time off, rewarding them with choice on the projects that they work on, rewarding them with an additional educational trip or an additional professional development opportunity, achievement awards and recognition that gets publicized, broadly, not just departmentally, but organization-wide, licensing manager of the year award. I mean, there's many, many, many things one can do. You can get creative with you may have a stay bonus opportunity within your organization. You could potentially use that on a regular basis if you can find money to fund it. Instead of and link it to their performance. Nobody says you can't do that, right? As a manager.
Yeah.
So there are some, additional creative solutions. But at the end of the day, there are some employees who are going to be motivated by that fiscal factor. And we've just got to make sure to pay people competitively, or our good ones will leave.
Yeah. All right. We only have about a minute left, so just a couple of rapid fire questions here. One was, how was the TTO incentive pool set? Was it whenever you did experience that, was it fixed percentage of profit / revenue, or was it set annually by senior leadership after that fiscal year ended? What was that?
Very modest fixed percent, 5% of your salary with divided by 3 based on performance to budget, disclosures, and deals.
Okay, great.
Yeah, ours was kind of in a similar range. It was set, it was somewhere typically between 3% and 6%. And the amount was dependent on how well the organization did financially, how much they could afford to pay out.
Yeah. And then the last thing I'll ask real quick, just a quick response again. Did you see any, have either of you seen any trends where the base salary started to stagnate or lag behind peer institutions over time since initiating the bonus program? Well, I don't remember I think you inherited the bonus program. I don't remember if you initiated, but did either of you see anything like that happen?
No.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, but I would say, at least for the licensing team, their salaries weren't annually increasing. So that was part of the motivation too, which then the rub was their base wasn't increasing for their retirement benefits and things like that. So not exactly stagnating, but they weren't increasing as fast as they wanted them to naturally.
All right.
The day that the autumn salary survey published, my people were in my office in a quick procession for discussions.
All right. Well, there are a couple other great questions in the Q&A. That's all we have time for. So there will be a follow-up to this conversation and to this webinar as well. First, thank you so much to our panelists for this time. Jeff has dropped a link to their information in the chat. If you have not already done so, there was a survey that was sent out before the webinar. We will follow up with the results from that survey. It is still live right now, but we will follow up after this with the results from that survey as well. I'd also like to give a quick thank you to Suzanne and Todd from Gardner Innovation Search Partners, as well as Jeff Bond from Chat with Leaders Media for their great work behind the scenes. And one more thank you to our sponsor for the event, Gardner Innovation Search Partners. If you're interested in learning more about them, visit gardnerisp.com. Thanks again, all of our panelists. And last but not least, thanks to all of you who tuned in. You could have spent your time anywhere and you chose to spend it with us. We appreciate your time and your engagement, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.